You know, that they are crazy for football. You know, you see some of the fans and some of the games that I've watched online. You have to realise is when they come over here, that opportunity that they get is something that, you know, not many players from Indonesia will get. And people now realise that, you know, it's not easy being a footballer. There's not many young boys that go on to be footballers. And we found a man in the bushes spying. And everyone was, what's going on? There's a man spying in the bushes. What's he doing? And then obviously the story came out that he was from Leeds United. Bielsa had sent him down to look at Derby and work out what they were doing from set plays, what shape they're going to play.
Kembali lagi di Super Soccer Podcast. Apa kabar semuanya? Semoga sehat saja ya. Gue Evan di sini dan ya memang gue ngebuka podcast ini yang kalau biasanya artinya adalah gue monolog. Tapi tenang aja, kali ini berbeda. Rifki tidak hadir di episode kali ini karena gue sudah ditemani seseorang yang jauh lebih spesial daripada Rifki. Sorry ya Ki. Gue akan ditemani oleh Danny Holmes. Ada yang tahu Danny Holmes siapa? Nah, Danny Holmes ini adalah salah satu staf pelatih Garuda Select. Kita akan bicara banyak dengan Danny, mulai dari Premier League, perkembangan Premier League ya, lalu perkembangan sepak bola Inggris, terutama untuk generasi mudanya, dan terakhir tentu saja kita akan bahas tentang Garuda Select. Hello Danny.
Hi there, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, very well. No problems over in England. The weather's not great, but we're all fine.
Okay. But Danny, you watched the Community Shield yesterday?
Did I watch what? Sorry.
Community Shield.
I didn't know. Do you know what? I tend to try and stay away from them games because I think it's a bit of a friendly game that doesn't really show much. So even though Liverpool didn't win the game, and of course Arsenal won on penalties, I think that I don't think it's a true reflection. You know, at the end of the day, it's still a friendly game. Of course, both teams want to try and win the Community Shield, but I don't think it's going to show much throughout the season. I still think Liverpool will probably be stronger than Arsenal over the season.
Well, I believe many Arsenal supporters will be unhappy with your comment, you know.
Because I think Arsenal fans always get carried away sometimes. In some games early doors, and they think they're going to do really well, and then for some reason, you know, they've got a good team. I think they'll probably do better this year than they have in previous seasons. I don't think they'll quite be challenging for the title yet, whereas I think Liverpool probably come the end of the season will be right up there again. So Arsenal fans, I think, will have a good season, and I'm sure Arsenal will, but I think Liverpool will probably be ahead of them, you know, come the end of the season.
So Premier League is going to start at 12 September. Many teams already started their friendly match. In example, Chelsea against Brighton yesterday. But one thing that's interesting is that match is attended by few fans in the stadium. Consider the situation in England right now. Do you think it's possible to be implemented in the Premier League?
I don't know. You know, you can only go from government guidelines in terms of fans. You know, it was good to see some in the stadium yesterday. Although, you know, even letting in 2,000 or 3,000 fans into them sort of stadiums, it still feels very empty. You know, it's very difficult. You know, I think Premier League will probably get away with it for a certain time, not letting fans in because financially they're stable. But if you go down the leagues, you know, into Championship, League One, League Two clubs, I think they need fans to survive. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm sure that, you know, the players and the clubs will want fans in because it creates an atmosphere. You know, especially at home games for teams like Liverpool and teams like Man City, they need that sort of 12th man. So if they're getting a lot of fans in, it certainly can help them as the season goes on. And of course, the fans are desperate to see live football and see their team. So it's difficult, but you know, we can only run by what the government say. And the most important thing, of course, is keeping everybody safe. And if that takes, games to be played behind closed doors and on TV, then that's what it takes. So, of course, we want fans back in, but like I said, main thing is keeping people safe.
You mentioned some interesting point there, because about the financial situation for the clubs below the Premier League, it must be pretty hard, but makes me think, how's the academy life in there? Do you know the situation in there? I mean, are the football clubs in League One, League Two academy still working on?
Yeah, it's been very difficult actually. Even like the Premier League clubs, with their academies during lockdown. I know that they weren't obviously allowed to go in and train. So what they had to do was trying to keep people fit over Zoom, like our call is now. So they would have their squad of players over Zoom doing fitness work. They would create a lot of running programs for them. Some of them would even try and do some like ball manipulation and ball skills over Zoom. But it has been very difficult for academies to keep running, in terms of not being able to go in and train. I think it was Stoke City and Burton Albion. They had like a skills competition over Zoom. So they would have some of the Stoke players doing some skills, and they would have some people mark their skills. And then the Burton Albion players would do some skills, and someone would mark their skills, and then they would try and make it a bit of a competition, a bit of fun. So people are coming up with different ideas to continue training, but it has been very difficult. And the quicker that players can get back to normal and train with their teams and play games, which has actually just started here the last couple of weeks for the academy boys. The quicker that can happen, and hopefully we don't go back into lockdown, the better. I'm sure the boys, although they've got on with it and, like I said, done things over Zoom and been given running programs, I'm sure they much prefer to be playing games and get back to normal as soon as possible.
Okay. So I hope the pandemic in England will be much better in the future. How the government handling the situation. Because for me, as a football fans in Indonesia who watch the football games in television, the sound of supporters really makes me comfort. Not comfort, but maybe the more relatable situation. But when you saw the tribune is empty, it's really sucks.
Yeah, it's totally different, and the players have to then also, it's different, totally different going into an empty stadium than a full stadium. All of a sudden, if you go into a full stadium and the atmosphere's there, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up even as a player, and it sort of gets you ready for the game. So I think players have had to adjust and realise that it's on them now to create that atmosphere. So as soon as that whistle blows, it's on them to be on the front foot, go and play at a good tempo, because often when there's nobody watching, the tempo of the game can be a lot slower. And I think we saw that in the Premier League games to start with. Some of the games were slower and there was a lot more possession and people sitting back. Whereas often if there's a crowd in there, that creates an atmosphere and a tempo that people have to go and play quicker and try and score goals to entertain the fans. So it has been difficult, I'm sure, for the players. But again, the main thing is that they've been able to play and obviously last year get the season finished. I'm sure they're looking forward to the new season.
Yeah. So another thing that difference with the Premier League is VAR. Do you personally agree with VAR?
Good question. I think you have to go with VAR in terms of 9 times out of 10 it gets the right decision. I know we saw quite a big one that it got wrong, or probably 2 or 3 times last year that they get wrong. But the majority of the time, I think VAR does work. It gets it right. And, it's difficult because if you leave it down to the referee, you get him making more wrong decisions than VAR does. So I think in terms of that, VAR definitely works. What I don't like is how you have to wait for the decisions.
Yeah.
There's a bit of uncertainty and the fans aren't sure what's happening. The players aren't sure what's happening. The referee's holding his ear, listening for for the video assistant referee to tell him what's right or wrong. So it's not going to be as fast flowing. There's going to be more stoppages. There's going to be more breaks. But I think overall, as long as the 9 times in the right, it's difficult sometimes. You see all the players scoring a goal and celebrating together, only for it to be ruled out, and they're like, everyone's heads down. And so I understand people's arguments, but I think we have to go with it.
But I want to know, how's the real public perception about VAR? Because as far as I know, the perception about VAR in social media is mixed. How's the real situation in England? Are supporters that come to the stadium, they like it?
Yeah, I think it's very mixed over here. People who you talk to, you can talk to one person who's really keen on it. You can talk to someone else who totally disagrees with it, and then you can speak to one club that kind of likes it, probably because they've had a few decisions go for them. Oh. You can speak to another club that doesn't like it because they've had a few.
Are you talking about Manchester United?
I'm not talking about anybody. I'm just saying in general. But that's how it is. I think everywhere, everyone you speak to is just so not sure, really. And I think they have to, it's probably the first time we've really used it in the Premier League last year. Obviously, it was trialled at a few European games and World Cup games and things. But I think it's important they really learn from last year and try and get things that weren't quite right. They need to sort them things out. So in terms of probably quicker decisions, also making sure that, if the referee does need to go and check something, I didn't see many times the referee going over and looking at the screen. I think he went off what he was told. So little things like that I think can improve. But if they get them things right and we can be a little bit quicker with it, and also the screens in the stadium. So you're getting the screens in the stadium with different messages on, and the referee's, not given a penalty, and it's on the screen, it's saying a penalty. Little things like that are confusing and get the fans wound up. I think if they can sort them things out, I think, VAR will probably be a success next year.
Okay. Then let's talk about Leeds United, the new kids on the blocks, maybe, but not really new, but they have been more than a decade out of the Premier League. So
new to the Premier League in terms of now, but I think their history and they are such a big club. They should be in the Premier League. They have a massive fan base. They've obviously done very, very well in days gone by in their history. So it'll be exciting to see how they do this year in the Premier League.
Do you think they can replicate what Sheffield did last year?
Yeah, I think they certainly can. We've got a very good manager, of course, with Bielsa. Interesting actually. When I was working at Derby County, it was when he sent one of his scouts or one of his men to spy, and it was a big thing.
The Bielsa game. That's a really interesting story.
The police came into the training ground one day and what are the police doing here? And then there was a man walking in, and we found a man in the bushes spying. And everyone was, what's going on? There's a man spying in the bushes. What's he doing? And then obviously the story came out that he was from Leeds United. Bielsa had sent him down to look at Derby and work out what they were doing from set plays, what shape they're going to play. And then, of course, he had to come clean of how deep he goes into his analysis of teams. And it really showed that, his management style and how he organises his team and how he sets up his team, they go into so much depth and so much analysis that it obviously helps him and it works with what he does. And it was a big thing, obviously, in England that someone was spying. But by the sounds of things, he's not been caught for it before, but I think he's probably done it a few times, and he gets as much information on every team he can play as possible, and he sets his team up accordingly. And, it's worked this year. They've got up into the Premier League, and hopefully they can go on and do well again.
You were on the ground. You were at the ground that day.
Yeah, I was at the training ground. Yeah.
So everyone is furious when the story came out.
It was just a strange situation. People start talking and start saying someone's been found in the hedges, and to start with, you think, well, what's going on? Someone's been found in the hedges and they're spying and they've got binoculars and a rucksack, and you think, well, you just don't know. You don't know. It could be some strange man that's trying to, get close to the players. It could be a Derby fan that is really keen on watching the training. But when the story came out, it was just unbelievable, and something that, I think obviously hit the press and got into the back pages and even the front pages of some of the newspapers, and something that, even though he's unbelievable, you start to sort of look at Bielsa and his techniques, and that's just what he does. And of course, like I said, that's worked for his team, and he gets that much information. And I think he had to come clean in the press and show what he does and how he sets up for games and their sort of weekly routine of their analysis on other teams, just to show that that's how he works. And I think, it probably could have gone one or two ways for Bielsa, but actually people respected him for the amount of work and the amount of in-depth analysis that he did. And of course, if it's working, no one can really argue with that. So, fair play to him, but it was a very strange situation at the training ground that day.
So we know that Bielsa had a unique method, with all the analysis that he did. Do you think he's one of the most perfectionist manager in Premier League right now, except than Guardiola?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think even though he's come up from the Championship, he's got a great team with Leeds. He's got some very good players, but his management style and how he goes about his day-to-day running of the club and his management style and working with the players, you would have to say he's one of the best, because he's been very close to being promoted to the Premier League the last couple of years, and then of course this year they've done it. But the big test is always being in that big league and going up against the top teams week in, week out. You asked the question about Sheffield United. Could Leeds do a Sheffield United and go on and do really well this year in the Premier League? That will be interesting to see. I think Sheffield United are a different team. How they play and how they set up. They're more physical probably than Leeds. They have sort of they get the ball wide. They get a lot of crosses into the box. But it'll be interesting to see. I think Leeds. I can't see them coming straight back down. I think they're too good for that. Will they be challenging at the top end, top 10? Possibly. Again, it'll be very interesting to see.
Okay. Then how about the title contender? Do you still Liverpool will win it again?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think Liverpool will win the Premier League again?
I think Manchester City, with their signings, will be challenging up there again.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very difficult for Liverpool. And also, I think there's going to be probably a couple more teams that you could add into there that will probably do better than last season. I would like to see, we mentioned Arsenal at the very start of the conversation. I'd like to see Arsenal probably pushing for, a top 4 finish, maybe even better than that this year. That'll be interesting to see. I think Arteta's done a very good job with Arsenal. Also, Chelsea this year, Frank Lampard again, done an excellent job. He's got a good team. I think they'll spend wisely and get some more good players in and add to that. And then Man United as well, such a massive club.
Yeah, but the transfer sucks. I'm a United fan, so I hate that we haven't got anyone until now.
Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting. They've got a good team, though. You look around. Yes, of course, you always need to add to what you've got and try and make it as strong as possible in all areas. But they have a good team. They started to do better last year, and I'll be looking forward to seeing how they do. So I think it's going to be probably the tightest Premier League title race for the top 6 places, definitely. We've had for a long time, because there's a lot of good teams in there, and a lot of teams that seem to just be turning the corner and sort of coming back to where they were. So the likes of Man United, the likes of Arsenal, the likes of Chelsea. I think them sort of teams, Tottenham even now, I think they're going to be up there. So it's going to be a good title race, a great season for the Premier League, and one that we can all be excited to watch.
Okay, but if we talk about United and Chelsea, the most obvious thing, I guess, from Lampard and Solskjaer approach is how they believe in the young players.
Yeah.
Maybe can you tell me a story about how Lampard maintain their young players and give them the trust when in Derby?
Yeah, I think, it's probably the interesting thing with Frank Lampard, is even when he was at Derby, he had Jody Morris with him.
Yeah.
And obviously he's got a youth background, and so he wants to try and give the younger players a chance. Again, he's done well this year with Chelsea, playing some of the young players. I think early on, although he played some of the young boys, I think he realised that actually you need to add a little bit of experience in there, just to help them young players. And it's probably easier in the Championship, where you're not expected to, especially the time, you have to be brave enough to put them in there. And then at Chelsea, he's probably been very lucky with the likes of Mason Mount, people like that. Tammy Abraham done well for him, and they're good players. It doesn't matter what age you are, if you're 18, 19, 20, if you're good enough, you're good enough, and you get put in there and you do well, then that's excellent, So I think it'll be interesting again to see how they do this year, but the young boys he's got there are very good players, so I'm sure they'll be okay.
There are more and more academic players got through ranks to Premier League clubs. What's the story behind it? Because when I was a kid, I don't think there's many talented young players such as right now. You see, like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mason Mount, Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood. What's the story behind it?
Yeah, I think it's sort of come round, really. I think, if you go back probably 10 or 15 years, we had some great young players coming through. The likes of Beckhams, even the Rooney's, the Rio Ferdinands. You get some great young players coming through into the Premier League. And then all of a sudden, I think, don't know why, for what reason, I think we started to get players in from Spain, from France, and probably filled the Premier League with foreign players, very good players, but foreign players. And then all of a sudden, I think, we sort of come round full circle and realised, actually, we've got some good young players in our academy setups. And then again, it's about the managers being brave to put them players in and give them a chance. And when young players have a chance, like you've mentioned there, Trent Alexander-Arnold, even Mason Mount at times, Greenwood at Man United, these types of players, when they get a chance, you realise that these are top players. And it takes somebody brave, and it takes people to back them, and of course a good education, if you like, within their academies, and then players will come through. I think we've still got a lot of great talent over here, and if they get opportunities to play in the first team, they won't let people down. It's just a matter of, like I said, the manager or the sporting director, the chairman, whoever it is, giving them young players an opportunity.
And it must be really exciting for you as a English, to show that young English young players get through and play at the elite level.
Yeah, that's excuse me. As an English coach and a young English coach, you always want young English players to come through. Working within an academy system, I was at Derby County for 10 or 11 years. Your main goal is to produce players for your first team and above. So if we can produce players for a championship team, or if we can produce players that go on to play in the Premier League, then, you feel some sort of buzz from that, because that's what your job is, to try and help and try and guide players as best as you can. And if they go on to have careers in the Premier League at the very top level, then you feel a buzz about that, and that's great. Today at Derby, we've had a couple of players come through who are now in the Premier League. Will Hughes was there, who's at Watford, just got relegated actually, so he'll be in the Championship next year. And also Jeff Hendrick, who came through. He's just signed for Newcastle. He's had a good few years in the Premier League with Burnley. So when you work with these players and you see them go through and do well, it gives you a sense of pride and a sense of help. And of course, it's certainly not down to me as a coach. And it's not down to any coach, really. It's all about the player. And if they put the hard work in, we are just there as coaches to guide and help as we see. But, them sort of players, if their mindset's right and they've got the ability, we can help them through. They go on to have great careers, and that's fantastic to see.
It has anything to do with the elite plan from the FA?
I think that's been, it's been great in many ways. The EPPP, I think, has done some great things within academies. Certainly facility-wise, it's made academies realise that they have to spend money on their infrastructure. So they're, all of a sudden now, academies have indoor pitches, outdoor pitches, floodlit pitches. They have AstroTurf pitches. They have classrooms with computers in that they can do video analysis. Really important. They have to spend money on, their strength and conditioning program, so their gym. They have to spend money on their physiotherapy program. So all of a sudden now, the infrastructure that the EPPP has brought in, if you want to be a top academy, you have to make sure that every area that even your education program, for the boys that need a plan B, is football isn't going to work out. Every area of your academy has to be spot on if you want to be at the top. And I think the EPPP Elite Player Performance Plan, bringing that in, has really helped academies. I think also, it's also made people more aware of the detail and the hours and the hard work that coaches have to spend, certainly, to get everything just right and make sure that players are getting what they need. So, just for an example, it's not just about that hour and a half or the 2 hours that you spend on the training pitch with the young players. It's about then creating a specific program for every individual. What do they need? How can we improve this individual to be the best he can be? It's about the analysis on him. It's about also the player taking responsibility and making sure that they're working hard, yes, during training, but also away from the training ground. What are they doing? Are they eating right? Are they making sure that they're getting good sleep and good rest? I think it's become a lot more professional in every sense, and people now realise that it's not easy being a footballer. There's not many young boys that go on to be footballers, and I think that sort of mindset and that sort of work ethic, is the bare minimum, really. You have to be able to do that to get to the top. And like I said, it's not easy. There's a lot of players don't make it. Otherwise, everybody would be playing. Otherwise, everyone would be playing the Premier League, which is everyone's dream. But I think, boys are now realising that and putting so much more work and so much more effort and concentration on every level. So you see players now, even in going back 15 years or so when I was a young player coming through, 20 years, you would never think about doing extras and going in the gym. That just would be not heard of. But now every single player is in the gym. Every single player is making sure that physically they are 100% right to perform at the best level they can. So I think, the EPPP has been really good for them sorts of things. And I think hopefully, like you've just said then, some of the players that are coming through now from that system, it's proof in the pudding, really. And hopefully we can continue to create players of that level that go on to have great careers and play in the Premier League and then play for their national teams.
Do you think the Well, I read some articles that say England now have Premier League and the FA have hundreds of competitions for these young players, and it's the continuity. Do you think it's important for them? I mean, they're not just training and playing for nothing right now, right?
Yeah, I think that's something that's very interesting actually, because they don't. This has been a big argument within academies over here. Is that they have a games program, so they play every Saturday if you're a 16 or an 18, under a 16 or an 18. If you're an under 15 or below, you might play on a Sunday. But then games are never competitive, so there's no league. Of course, you want to win, so it's competitive, but there's no league system. So what they tried to do, you know, the Premier League, the FA, they tried to put as many competitions in as possible. So all of a sudden, then you have the Premier League Cup, you have a six-a-side competition, you have a floodlit cup competition where you're playing against teams, just to make these games more competitive and more real, because at 15, 16, 17 even, some of them boys could make a step up into the first team. By the way, never have played a competitive, and I think winning has been probably a dirty word in England for a long time. Learning how to win is important. Now, judging that the right age between it's all about winning or is it about development, that is quite a key area to think about, really, because, you know, under nines football, is it about winning games or is it about making sure that
fun football
them players are developing?
That's
interesting.
That's interesting, I guess, because I want to ask you as a coach, what's the most hard thing to develop from these young players? Is it the technical, tactical, mental, attitude?
I think it depends on the individual, because you get certain players that are very, very talented, but they don't want to work hard, and mentally they just stroll around the pitch. They don't think they have to work hard. So for them types of players, the most important thing is to work on their mindset and make them realise that they have to run around and they have to work hard if they want to be a footballer. For other players, you know, they want to really work and they've got great energy, they're really physically fit, but technically they're not great. So then you have to work with them with the ball technically. I think the important thing is that young players coming through realise what they are as a player. So are you a ball-winning midfield player that's going to get box to box and run up and down all day? Or are you a creative midfield player that needs to get on the ball and every time you get it, you're trying to create things? Are you a centre-back that likes to get on the ball and play out from the back? Or are you a centre-back that is just an out-and-out defender? And whatever type of player you are, go and influence the game with what you do. Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing that young players can realise, really. Coming back to your point, what's the hardest thing to...
I mean, what's your biggest challenge as a person?
Yeah, probably technically, I would say. I think technically is always a challenge, because unless you get the players at a very young age, and even then, you know, natural ability will always come through. And unless you get the players at a very young age, 7, 8, 9, 10, and really concentrate technically on them at that age, by the time they're 16, 17, it's very difficult to improve them technically. Yeah, you can improve them physically, you can improve their game understanding and their understanding of team shape and things like that. But to improve them technically, if they haven't had that work as a younger player, is very difficult. So I would probably say that as a coach, if you're getting a boy at 15, 16, 17, and technically they aren't quite good enough, it's very difficult to then go and improve that.
Okay. So you think that what the technical is must be teach to the kid when they 9 or 10 years old?
I think that would help, because that is when they take things on board the most. That is when they learn the most. And also that gives them a longer amount of time to work with the ball and practice, you know. So if you get them at 9, they've then got however many years, 6, 7 years, till they're in and around proper football, men's football. And then hopefully, technically, they'll be okay then. And even at 9, though, sometimes, you know, some players are very technical. You know, it's a God-given talent. You know, they're born with that. They're very good. Of course, you practice and you get better as you get older. And some players aren't born with that. And again, you can practice and get better, but it's all about levels, you know. Some players will be superbly technical and talented, like Messi, right? So you've got Messi at one end. Yeah? Then you've got another player who's playing at a very, very good level, who's just underneath Messi. But he's never going to be as talented and as technical. But again, it's about getting the most out of yourself, you know, and being the best you can possibly be as an individual.
Only few young players could make football as their professional career, let alone reach elite level.
Yeah.
Do you ever face a case where this youngster becomes so depressed or feel anxiety?
Yeah, it's a lot of times within, you know, within my experience of working in academies and with young players, certainly a lot of times, you know, we've had players come to you before feeling worried, you know, especially when it's time to make decisions on players, when it's about their future, you know, they're coming to the end of their contracts or the end of the year where you're making decisions on, are we going to retain them or are we going to release them? You know, it's a very stressful time for players. And, you know, and I think within academies now, they have psychologists working with them. So they're in a good place now. It's not like going back a few years ago where, you know, you just get a boy in on his own, probably without his parents even, and you're saying, right, we don't want you anymore, goodbye, you're out the door. And I think, you know, them days have gone. It's a little bit more, not easier for the player now, because that's not the right word. It's more thought about now. You know, every decision is really spoken about between coaches, between staff. And also then, of course, we get the player in, and we don't want that end message when you're releasing a player to be a surprise. So you will have had meetings throughout the year with the player and the parent, so that come the end of the season, when you're making a decision whether to retain or release him, the player and the parent will have a good idea of what is coming. So then it's not as much of a stress, it's not as much of a worry for the player, because they actually know the picture already. So I think that has improved. But, you know, we've had some players come to me upset, crying in the dressing room or crying in the meeting rooms. And it's very difficult, you know. At the end of the day, they're young boys. Some of them are 14, 15, 16, even younger than that, some of the players I work with to start with. And, you know, they're still going to bed at night with a teddy. So they're young kids, you know. It's hard. And that is why, you know, football is a very difficult place to get in, and you have to be mentally so strong at times. And you know, people do get anxious, people do get worried and upset, and it's part of their learning and part of their journey, I suppose, to becoming a football player. And some players will deal with that and go on to have good careers, and some players won't deal with that, and they'll drop out of the game. And, you know, unfortunately, we try and help them as much as we possibly can, but that's just the way of the world, and that's just the way football is.
Do you think the club should help them with an exit plan, maybe?
Yeah, and that's something that the clubs are doing now. Certainly, you know, the gone are the days where you just get rid of a player and you never speak to them again and you forget about them. You know, gone are them days. So I think that now the exit plans are that good. You're almost trying to get that player to another club, or get that player sorted with a college program somewhere, or, you know, and that, you know, even with my background at Derby, you know, we would work so hard to make sure that every player that goes out of the building has got something that they can go on to. we get videos sent out to every club. We will speak to everybody that we know within the local area to try and get them a club. We'll get them on trial at places. If they don't want to go into football, which some of the boys don't want to, they've had enough, we will try and get them at local colleges or non-league clubs so they can still play football, but they've got a bit of an education program as well. So the exit plans now are much better than they used to be, and the welfare of the boys is much more well thought of and well thought out. So I think, players going to academies now are well looked after, and it's still very difficult, don't get me wrong, it's still very difficult for young players because they have to work hard, they have to be put under a lot of pressure, but they are academies are in a better place now to deal with that than they have been in the past.
Okay, great. So then this case not only happened to the English young players, but also for the foreign players, because we know many youngsters from other nations come to England to pursue their dream to become a footballer. With a group that's so diverse, how big is their impact to England's youth development landscape?
How big is the impact of foreign players coming across?
Yeah, because in Indonesia, we never find foreign players learn football in Indonesian academies.
Yeah, well, I think now recruitment within academies is such a big business.
Okay.
People are spending millions of pounds on recruiting players for their academies to try and get them into their first team, or if not into their first team, to try and create, it's like a business plan almost.
Sorry if I interrupt. Even in Derby.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I thought it's only for the big clubs in the Premier League.
Even at Derby County, right? Which, listen, we're a champion. They're a championship club. Obviously, they've been in the Premier League. They're a Category 1 academy, so they're in the top academy. They will try and get players in from France. I've seen France, Polish boys, German boys, Irish players. We try and get them across. And sometimes we have to pay money for them. So, when I was there, even like £300,000-400,000 for a player. We get them in, and then hopefully they go on to make appearances at our first team. If not, obviously it's a bit of a gamble. But in terms of us spending as an academy, and I was there with Derby, that certainly happened, And I think it's easier probably for some of the bigger clubs. So the likes of Chelsea, they've done it really well.
Yes.
They get players in, and their sort of strategy is to get players in. They will buy them from other clubs, maybe not even with an idea of playing for the first team, but they have a loan strategy where they will charge loan fees for these players that they bought and get their money back. So, you talk about Patrick Bamford even. He was at Chelsea for a long time. Don't think he played many games for the first team, but he had so many different loans. And every time Chelsea will get a loan fee for him. And that happens with a lot of different players. And eventually they go on to sell him. And then, they've sold him to Leeds and they get their money back that they spent in the first place. So it's quite a complicated sort of business plan, but one that is working, especially for the top clubs. And there's more pressure the lower you go down, because the lower the club, the less money they have to spend, of course.
Yeah.
So then decisions then become even more key. We have to make sure we're getting the right boys in, and that if you are spending 300, 400, 500,000 pounds on a player, that decision has to be right, And to be fair to Derby, they've done quite well with the young players they brought in, and they brought in Jayden Bogle, who is a right back at Derby. They brought him at an under 15, under 16. And he's gone on to play a lot of first team games, and I think quite possibly maybe moving soon, so they'll get a fee for him. And they've got a good Irish lad in, Jason Knight, who's played a lot of games in the first team now. They bought him at under 15, paid some money for him from Ireland. So that there is a plan there, but like I said, with the lower clubs, it has to be really spot on. with the bigger clubs, it's a little bit easier because they've got more money to spend for one, and also that when they do loan them out, if they're at a Chelsea, league clubs in the Championship or League One will loan them out and pay a fee for them. So it's an interesting one, but something that definitely goes on, and one that, you know, it's hard to disagree or agree with it, really. If it's working for the club, it's working for the club. And if the player's gaining experience and goes on to have a career from it, then great.
You certainly have worked with the young players from the other nationalities, such as Garuda Select. So what's your most exciting match that you remember?
For Garuda?
Yes.
Good question. Really good question. Because there's been a few, you know. There's been a few. I think one that stands out in my mind, and even though we didn't win the game, was we played Arsenal, going back into the first season they were here, and we played, you know, we played really well, and it was the first time that I'd seen sort of the shape coming together, people starting to understand the game, and like I said, we didn't win the game, but how we looked as a team and how individuals performed was something that I'd not really seen before in the past. So as a coach, you know, it's not always, of course you want to win the games, but it's not always about the result. And listen, it's going to be very difficult for Garuda Select to beat the likes of Arsenal, the likes of Chelsea that we've played. But when you see them taking things on board as a coach and understanding what you've been working on in the week during training, that is the most pleasing thing. And I just remember that game against Arsenal, that all of a sudden things started to click and people are understanding and working together as a unit, and we defended quite well. We looked dangerous on the counter-attack, and just things started to come together. So for me, the Arsenal game last season was pleasing, and I think Bagus scored a header from a corner in that game as well. So that was good. We got a goal, but that was one of the games that sticks out in my mind, certainly.
So Garuda is a different type of group that you ever teach, right? Because I mean, when you're at the Derby or at other clubs, you mostly work with the English player, but this team is all foreign players. Yeah. How's that experience for you?
It's been a great experience, actually, in terms of, you know, working with a translator to start with. Never done that before, so having that in front of you when you're coaching is different. You know, it takes a little bit longer, something that we've had to get used to. Also the culture, of course, you know, the boys coming over from Indonesia, they have to try and get used to our culture, but also we have to try and get used to their culture, and that's been a challenge at times, one that's been good, and I think, you know, we've got a good balance now, and we've got a good understanding of each other, them as us as coaches, and us coaches as them as players, and I think also that, you know, they have to try and understand that our English football is different to what they've been used to. So it's a lot sort of quicker over here. It's a lot high tempo. You know, the teams they come up against are very physical, and that's been a challenge for the boys to get used to. Remember, first of all, you know, the ball would go out of play sometimes when they first came over, and they would be walking back looking at their own goal, and the play would be going on, and you thought, lads, come on, quick! Like, you have to be a little bit sharper and set up quicker. You know, you don't have that sort of time over here. And the boys get used to that very quickly, which is great to see. You know, and I think then what the boys have to realise is that they are here for a reason. You know, they're good players. They've been given a fantastic opportunity to come and showcase their talent against some of the best players in the country of England, or even in the world, really, in terms of when they play the top clubs. And it's a fantastic opportunity for them, one that they have to realise quickly, and the ones that realise that they have that opportunity and can take that opportunity, they're the ones that go on and do well. So it's been great experience for us as coaches, but also a great experience for the players that, you know, one they enjoy and one they seem to revel in and do well.
considering Indonesia is not the strongest team even in the Southeast Asia. Do you have ever surprised to see that Indonesian young players that talented?
I don't think
Just
it
being
was a
honest.
surprise. No, I don't think it was a surprise to me. What I didn't realise as a coach was how big football in Indonesia is. You know, that they are crazy for football. You know, you see some of the fans and some of the games that I've watched online. The Indonesian people love football, and I wasn't aware of that until I came, you know, with Gruda Select and came in as a coach. So that was something that surprised me. I don't think how talented the boys are surprised me because, you know, you're going to get good players. What they need to sort of take on board, you know, you get the likes of Bagus, you know, the likes of David, the likes of Brilliant, Raffley this season, you know. They are very talented, great players. And I think what they have to realise is when they come over here, that opportunity that they get is something that, you know, not many players from Indonesia will get. And I think Bagus probably realised it. David, maybe the first year, did he realise what a great opportunity he had? I'm not sure. The second year, certainly he did. And he, you know, he came in, he hit the ground running. He was more aggressive. He was on the front foot. He tried to play forwards more, which is something we spoke to him about. And, you know, he's gone from strength to strength, David, and done really well. Actually looking forward to seeing him with the Indonesian national team. You know, he's had to obviously go back, and him and Brilliant are involved with the national team. So I'm looking forward to seeing them games and seeing how they do, because when they were over here, they were really flying. They were fit. They were playing very well. And it would be really interesting to see, now they've gone back into their national team setup, how they get on. So I'm excited to see that, actually. But no, the boys, when they come over, some of their technical ability is excellent. I think probably an area that we could work on is their game understanding. You know, the tactical sort of tactical understanding, and talking about team shape a little bit more, and making sure that they understand their roles and responsibilities within that team shape. That's something that all the boys, when they come over, seem to need a little bit of work on. But I wasn't surprised with their technical ability. You know, I think they're not the biggest, of course, but technically they're very good players.
Okay, so do you know the boys go to Korea for the training camp with the under-19?
Yes, yeah, I'm aware of that. I spoke to both Brilliant and David through WhatsApp while they've been out there, and just to see how they're getting on. Both say they're really enjoying it. You know, they're both fine. They're doing well. So yeah, I was aware they've gone out there, and hopefully they have a good camp, and they continue from where they left off here. Because, like I said, when they've been over here, they've been excellent, flying in terms of their fitness. So hopefully that will put them into good stead when they go and train with their national team.
Yeah, so they are preparing for the World Cup under-20. You know,
Yeah.
do you have any message for them?
For who? For the boys?
Yes, yeah, because we know World Cup is not a thing that we as Indonesian used to compete in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very big test, of course, for the team, because you're going to come up against some of the best players in the world at that age group, under 20s. So I think all you can do is concentrate on yourselves. I would always say, you know, to our players, go and look at yourself after every single game and say, I've done the best I possibly can today. And that's all you can do, you know. Wherever you're playing, wherever you're training, after every training session, after every game, if you can come off the pitch and say, I have done the best I possibly can today, and that, if that's not good enough, then that's not good enough, you know. But if you can come off and say that at the end of the game, that's all you can do. And I think the boys need to make sure that when they're coming up against some of the top teams, their concentration is spot on. They don't switch off for even 2 or 3 seconds, because when you play against the best players, if you don't concentrate even for a short amount of time, you get punished, you know, and all of a sudden you're 1-0 down from a lack of concentration. You know, that's something even with the Gruda Select team, when they come over, we've found that a couple of times. You can play well for 89 minutes, and 1 minute, one lack of concentration can cost you a game. So that would be something I'd like to say to the boys. Make sure you switch on, you concentrate. You don't sort of come off, the gas for 1 second, because that is when you'll get punished. And also, I'd like to say to them, go and express yourselves. You're good players. Go and show what you've got. Don't be scared. Play without any restraint. Go and show the whole world, because there's going to be a big stage. Go and show the whole world what you are about as a player. And if they can go and do that, the players that I know in that setup have got a great chance of doing well. It's going to be tough, of course, because, like I said, you're playing against the best players. But don't forget, they've got some good players as well, and it'll be interesting to see how they get on. So it'll be a very good one to watch, and I'm looking forward to it, to be honest.
Okay, Danny, it's been a great discussion. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nah, itu dia tadi obrolan kita bareng Denny. Gimana? Seru kan? Udah dengar soal bagaimana Bielsa mengirim mata-mata dan bikin kehebohan di lapangan latihannya derby. Terus juga kita mendengar bagaimana perkembangan sepak bola Inggris, bagaimana mereka membina pemain muda sehingga mampu berprestasi, dan pemainnya sekarang memang relatif jadi bintang utama ya di klub masing-masing ya. City ada Sterling gitu, MU ada Rashford, Chelsea ada Mason Mount, bahkan Sancho di Dortmund juga sekarang harganya sampai tinggi banget jadinya. Dan tentu aja yang gak kalah penting adalah informasi tentang Garuda Select-nya. Bagaimana Denny, bagi dia pelatih pun ternyata dia mendapat pengalaman sendiri yang menarik, dan dia sangat mendukung anak-anak kita untuk nanti berlaga di Piala Asia U19 dan Piala Dunia U20. Nah, teman-teman, kalau kalian masih pengen dapat nih informasi menarik tentang sepak bola gitu, kalian bisa follow langsung media sosialnya Super Soccer. Ada di Instagram, ada di Twitter, lalu ada juga di Facebook. Dan yang gak kalah penting nih, gue pengen ngingetin bahwa kita sudah memasuki bulan September. Artinya musim sepak bola 2020 dan 2021 akan segera dimulai. Premier League akan mulai tanggal 12, sedangkan Bundesliga akan mulai tanggal 19. Dan dua liga ini bisa kalian saksikan di Mola TV. Langganannya murah kok, cuman gak nyampe 50.000 sebulan. 250.000 setahun, satu musim dapat tinggal duduk, nonton, tenang, anteng, nikmati sepak bola setiap minggunya. Oke, gue Evan signing out. Sampai ketemu lagi minggu depan.